The lunch rush had just ended when Marcus Johnson leaned against the counter and counted the day's earnings for the third time. The total was barely enough to cover the electricity bill. His small neighborhood restaurant, tucked between an old barber shop and a laundromat, had once been filled with laughter, families, and the smell of his grandmother's famous recipes. Now only a handful of customers came through the doors each day. Bills were stacked in a drawer behind the register, suppliers had begun asking for payments in advance, and the landlord had already warned him that another missed rent payment could mean the end of everything Marcus had spent 10 years building. Yet despite the constant pressure, he refused to lower the quality of his food or the kindness with which he treated every customer. His grandmother had raised him with one simple belief: a full stomach gives people hope. Marcus held on to those words like a lifeline. Just as he was about to lock the front door for the afternoon break, he noticed an elderly homeless man standing quietly across the street. The man looked exhausted. His gray beard was tangled, his coat was worn thin despite the cold wind, and his shoes had holes large enough to reveal his socks. Most people walked past him without even making eye contact. Some looked away in discomfort, while others hurried by as if poverty were contagious. The old man stared through the restaurant window, not with greed, but with quiet longing. Marcus recognized that look immediately. It was the look of someone who hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. For a brief moment, Marcus hesitated. He had only enough food prepared for the evening customers. Every plate mattered. Every dollar counted. Giving away a meal meant accepting one more financial loss on a day already filled with them. But then he remembered the countless times his own family had struggled when he was a child. Strangers had stepped in to help them without asking for anything in return. Taking a deep breath, Marcus unlocked the door again and waved to the old man. "Sir," Marcus called with a warm smile. "Would you join me for lunch?" The old man's eyes widened in surprise. He looked behind him to make sure Marcus wasn't speaking to someone else. When he realized the invitation was truly meant for him, tears quietly filled his eyes. He shuffled across the street, removing his old cap before stepping inside. "I don't have any money," the man whispered nervously. "You don't need any," Marcus replied. "Today, you're my guest." Marcus prepared the largest meal on the menu. Crispy fried chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, buttery cornbread, fresh green beans, homemade peach cobbler, and a tall glass of sweet tea. The old man stared at the table in disbelief before folding his hands in silent prayer. Every bite he took seemed to remind him of happier days long forgotten. Marcus stayed busy wiping tables but occasionally glanced over, smiling as he watched the man enjoy every single mouthful without wasting a crumb. When the meal was finished, the old man slowly stood and reached into his worn coat. Marcus quickly raised his hand. "Please," Marcus said. "You don't owe me anything." The elderly man smiled gently. "Perhaps not today," he answered. "But kindness always finds its way home." Those mysterious words lingered in Marcus's mind long after the old man disappeared down the street. The next morning, Marcus arrived early to unlock the restaurant. To his surprise, 3 expensive black SUVs were parked outside. Several men in business suits stood near the entrance. His first thought was that the building had been sold and he was about to lose everything. Before panic could take over, one of the suited men stepped forward with a respectful smile. "Are you Mr. Marcus Johnson?" Marcus nodded cautiously. "Our chairman would like to meet you." Moments later, the rear door of one SUV opened. Stepping out was the same homeless man Marcus had fed the previous afternoon. Except now he was clean-shaven, wearing a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, polished shoes, and an elegant watch. Marcus blinked in complete disbelief. "I know this is confusing," the elderly man said warmly. He explained that his name was Charles Whitmore, a retired billionaire entrepreneur. After losing his beloved wife several years earlier, he had become deeply disappointed by how people treated one another. He had begun traveling anonymously across the country, dressed as a homeless man, hoping to find businesses and individuals who still valued compassion over profit. Most restaurants had chased him away. Some employees laughed at him. Others threatened to call the police before he could even ask for water. "But you," Charles said, looking Marcus directly in the eyes, "invited me inside before I even spoke." Marcus stood speechless. Charles continued. "You didn't know who I was. You expected nothing in return. That's exactly the kind of person I want to invest in." One of the assistants handed Marcus a folder. Inside was an investment agreement worth $5 million. The funds would renovate his restaurant, eliminate all debts, expand to multiple locations, create scholarships for local culinary students, and establish a community kitchen that would serve free meals every weekend. Marcus's hands trembled so badly he could barely hold the papers. "Why me?" he asked quietly. Charles smiled. "Because businesses can be built with money," he said. "But legacies are built with character." Tears rolled down Marcus's face as he embraced the elderly man who had entered his restaurant hungry only a day before. Months later, Johnson's Kitchen became one of the city's most beloved restaurants. The food remained just as delicious, but people came for something even greater, the atmosphere of kindness. Every afternoon, one table near the front window remained permanently reserved. A small sign rested on it. "Reserved for anyone who is hungry." No questions asked. Customers often asked why that table was always free. Marcus would simply smile and reply, "Because one act of kindness fed far more than a hungry man. It fed hope, changed a life, and reminded me that the greatest blessings often arrive wearing the clothes the world ignores." Marcus never allowed success to erase the memories of struggle. Every morning before sunrise, he unlocked the front door himself, breathing in the familiar aroma of fresh biscuits, coffee, and seasoned chicken. His restaurant had expanded into a thriving business with hundreds of employees, but he still wore the same apron his grandmother had sewn years before. It reminded him that wealth could change a person's circumstances, but it should never change their heart. News of Marcus's incredible story spread across the country. Television stations featured his restaurant. Newspapers called him the man who fed a stranger and changed his destiny. Customers traveled from different states just to experience the famous restaurant with the table marked, "Reserved for anyone who is hungry." No questions asked. Some came for the food, but many came to witness whether the stories of kindness were true. They were. Every evening, someone in need sat at that table, a struggling single mother, an unemployed veteran, a runaway teenager, or an elderly widow living on a tiny pension. Marcus personally greeted each guest with the same warm smile he had given Charles Whitmore. No cameras were allowed. No photographs were taken. Kindness, he believed, lost its meaning when it became a performance. One rainy autumn afternoon, Marcus noticed a young boy standing outside in soaked clothes, clutching the hand of his little sister. They couldn't have been older than 10 and 7. The children stared through the restaurant window with the same expression Marcus had once seen on Charles's face. Without hesitation, Marcus opened the door. "Come inside," he said gently. "You're freezing." The children nervously explained that their mother had recently lost her job. They had been walking for hours after school because they didn't have enough money for bus fare or dinner. Marcus served them hot bowls of chicken soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and slices of warm apple pie. As they ate, he quietly arranged grocery deliveries to their home for the next several months and connected their mother with one of the restaurant's hiring managers. The grateful mother soon became one of Marcus's most dedicated employees. Within a year, she was managing an entire restaurant location, proving that sometimes all a person needs is one opportunity instead of one judgment. Charles Whitmore watched these moments proudly from a distance. Though well into his 80s, he often visited the restaurant without announcing himself. He would sit in a corner booth, smiling as he observed Marcus treating millionaires and homeless guests with exactly the same respect. One afternoon, Charles asked Marcus to walk with him through a nearby neighborhood where many abandoned buildings stood empty. "I have one final dream," Charles said. They stopped in front of an old warehouse. "I want this building to become a place where homeless families can learn job skills, receive counseling, and rebuild their lives with dignity. Not a shelter that simply offers beds, but a place that restores hope." Marcus smiled immediately. "I'm in." Construction began within weeks. Together they transformed the neglected warehouse into the Hope House Community Center. It included classrooms, a professional kitchen for culinary training, childcare services, temporary housing, and career counseling. Graduates who completed the program were guaranteed job interviews at Marcus's restaurants. Within 3 years, hundreds of people had rebuilt their lives through Hope House. Some became chefs, bakers, managers, and business owners themselves. Many returned as volunteers, eager to help the next person standing where they once had. Then, one quiet spring morning, Marcus received a phone call that broke his heart. Charles Whitmore had passed away peacefully in his sleep. At the memorial service, leaders from across the country gathered to honor the billionaire philanthropist. Many spoke about his business achievements and charitable donations. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he walked slowly to the podium, carrying an old, worn dinner plate from his restaurant. "This plate," Marcus began softly, "held the very first meal I served Charles. At the time, I believed I was feeding a hungry stranger. What I didn't know was that he was feeding my faith in humanity." The room fell silent. Marcus continued, "Charles often told me that people reveal who they truly are when they believe no one important is watching. I wasn't trying to impress anyone that day. I simply remembered what it felt like to be hungry." Many in the audience wiped away tears. A week later, Charles's attorney invited Marcus to read the final section of the billionaire's will. It contained one handwritten sentence. "To my friend Marcus Johnson, the man who proved that compassion is the greatest investment of all, I leave the responsibility of continuing everything we started together." Along with those words came a charitable foundation worth hundreds of millions of dollars, dedicated to fighting hunger, supporting small family-owned restaurants, and creating opportunities for people living in poverty. Marcus accepted the responsibility with humility, knowing it wasn't about money, it was about purpose. Years later, every Johnson's kitchen displayed the same simple sign near its entrance: "Kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything." Thousands of people read those words every day. Few knew the remarkable story behind them. But Marcus never forgot. Because one ordinary afternoon, when his own future seemed uncertain, he chose compassion over convenience. And that single meal became the beginning of a legacy that would feed not only hungry stomachs, but hopeful hearts, for generations to come. 10 years after Charles Whitmore's passing, Marcus Johnson stood on the stage of a packed auditorium as thousands of people applauded. Behind him, a giant screen displayed a simple number: 100 million meals served. The audience celebrated the achievement, but Marcus quietly shook his head before stepping to the microphone. "People keep congratulating me," he said with a gentle smile. "But this wasn't built by one man. It was built by every person who believed that kindness is never wasted." The crowd erupted into applause again. By then, Johnson's Kitchen had grown into a nationwide restaurant chain. Yet every location followed one unbreakable rule: no hungry person would ever be turned away. Employees were trained to greet every guest with dignity, whether they arrived wearing an expensive suit or worn-out clothes. One snowy December evening, Marcus decided to visit one of the newest restaurant locations without telling anyone who he was. He wore an old jacket and a knit cap, hoping to see how the staff treated an ordinary customer. As he stepped inside, a teenage cashier immediately smiled. "Good evening, sir. Welcome in. You look cold. Would you like a hot meal? Tonight it's on us." Marcus smiled quietly. The young employee had no idea he was speaking to the company's founder. As Marcus enjoyed his dinner, he watched the staff serve every customer with patience and respect. They laughed with children, helped an elderly couple carry their trays, and invited a homeless veteran to sit at the special table near the front window. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. The culture of kindness had survived. No one was following rules because the owner might be watching. They were doing it because they believed it was the right thing to do. When Marcus finally revealed his identity, the staff froze in surprise. The young cashier nervously apologized. "I'm sorry if I made any mistakes." Marcus stood and shook the teenager's hand. "You made only one mistake," he said. The young man looked frightened. "You thanked me for coming," Marcus continued. "The truth is, I should be thanking you. You protected the promise this company was built on." That employee was promoted to management within a year. As time passed, the Johnson Foundation expanded around the world, funding food banks, culinary schools, homeless shelters, and small business grants in dozens of countries. Thousands of people who had once received free meals eventually became donors themselves. One letter especially touched Marcus's heart. It came from a successful surgeon. The doctor wrote, "30 years ago, when I was 9 years old, my little sister and I came into your restaurant soaked by the rain. You gave us soup, sandwiches, and hope. My mother found work because of your kindness. Today I save lives because you first saved ours." Enclosed is a check to provide meals for another 50,000 people. Marcus read the letter several times before quietly placing it inside the old recipe book that had belonged to his grandmother. Late one evening, long after the restaurant had closed, Marcus sat alone at the original location where everything had begun. The famous table by the front window was still there. The sign remained unchanged. "Reserved for anyone who is hungry. No questions asked." Marcus gently ran his hand across the wooden tabletop. He thought about the frightened little boy he had once been. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about Charles Whitmore walking through that door dressed as a homeless man. Then he whispered softly, "You were right, Grandma. A full stomach really can give people hope." Outside, another tired stranger paused in front of the restaurant window. Marcus smiled, stood up, unlocked the door himself, and said the same words that had changed his own life many years before. "Come inside." The stranger hesitated. "I don't have any money." Marcus smiled warmly. "You don't need any." The door closed behind them as the lights glowed warmly against the cold night. And somewhere, the legacy